dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your warm but slightly muggy host, Madelyn.
I'm your why is it in the 50s again? Host Emma.
You say that, but it's Sunday, so it's 90 degrees now, Emma.
I don't know what temperature it is right now. I just know that this week it went between like 80 and then down to 55 the next day. And I am not enjoying it. Let's say.
You're going to have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you're wondering whether or not we've got an interesting topic this week, I'll let Emma tell you.
No. No, I'm sure it'll be interesting. It is a little funny. It's the equivalent of like, nice weather we're having, side quest. Yeah. The literal version of it. So
That's
right.
we're
talking weather and video games.
Yeah, listeners, it's weather week. Here on Talk This.
You can ask me your requisite question.
Why did you pick this? I took me a minute. I was like, is this like a weather joke? Like,
no. Have
a reason for it. Don't rain on my parade. It's no fair that you never have answer to this question.
Well, in this case, it literally is just what we were talking about, is that I've been annoyed by the weather these past couple of weeks because it's just violently oscillating between like 50s to like 80s. And in addition to like all the pollen coming out, so it's not been a very fun weather week for Emma.
There's not too many pollen systems in games.
I really think there should be. I think it would be really funny if it's like pollen season, so your character like sneezes periodically, so your aim's thrown off.
Am I imagining that Persona has like an allergy thing?
I think it does have high pollen weather, yeah, but I think it just affects, like, Joker doesn't sneeze. It just affects like things in Mementos, I think.
Okay. I was like, I feel like there is pollen in something. Yeah, not a lot of allergy systems in games. Get on that, teams.
Yeah.
We'd like to see dynamic allergy systems.
I want to see Link blowing his nose in the sequel to Breath of the Wild.
Like, into his hands.
You're right. Link would never use a tissue.
Yeah. Well, he couldn't carry it around. One use.
Right. It would have a durability system.
The irony, a tissue has infinite uses.
You could add like a crime system in other games, except it's how often has Link blown his nose into his hands, so people don't want to be around him.
He like reaches out to shake his. You have to get away so people don't see you. And then you get points if they shake your hand in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe that it was really inspired by like real life weather. It wasn't like, it's rainy in Cold Steel or something like that. No, you were just like, the rain out sucks.
I don't think it has ever rained in Cold Steel.
Dang.
I don't think it rains in this country.
They're not on trend.
I think it's actually that they probably could not handle it, judging from the confetti effect that lags the game in the first Cold Steel. I think that rain... You know what? Maybe it does rain. Maybe I'm just forgetting because it doesn't do anything. I feel like rain has an umbrella.
We'll save the Cold Steel talk for next side quest. How about that?
Okay.
So, to read Emma's questions in our note sheet, how does weather work in games? Is it difficult to implement? What's the history of weather systems? What are some ways that games use weather mechanically, or narratively, or as a set piece? Something that I noticed as we were going through is weather in games almost invariably means rain, maybe snow, maybe sand.
Sand isn't weather.
Sandstorm?
I guess.
It's not even really a weather, but you're right. It got mentioned in a lot of weather articles, and I didn't think, wait a minute, that's not really weather.
I mean, it probably falls under the same, like, technical system in terms of environmental effects, but I wouldn't really call desert a type of weather.
I guess so. It's wind, really, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
So, and maybe, like, there's a little bit of temperature here and there, but
fog is pretty common, I think.
Oh, you're right. That's true. But a lot of areas of weather that have been, like, left untapped.
What other weather is there?
Humidity. Not a lot of hail in games. Fewer tornadoes than you'd think. Tsunamis, hurricanes.
Well, at a certain point when you get to tsunami, like it has to be like a city builder game or something because like what are you going to do in your third person action game? It's like, oh, there's a tsunami coming.
Run away. There's a light breeze. Very rarely does your player character get buffs for, like, pleasant weather in the way that you do as a human when you step outside and it's a pleasant day.
That's true.
Sunburn. Frostbite. Lots of weather
That's
systems.
sort of implied by temperature systems, I feel like.
I guess so. But even temperature systems are much less common, I think, than just straight up rain.
Well, I mean, that's because in the end, temperature systems are like a mechanical thing, right? And rain can be used just as an aesthetic or a mechanical thing.
Why can't the DualSense set the temperature to be appropriate?
Why doesn't it have like a heating cooling system inside of it?
Yeah.
Gee, I don't know.
Can it do like smell-o-vision, like wind?
No, it can't, but doesn't have a fan. Doesn't blow on your face.
That's a disappointment. They should work on that for the PS6.
I don't think I really want a 4D DualShock, really.
You don't want it to blow wind in your face?
No. Man, you remember when we went to that Shrek show at Disney World?
A Shrek show would not have been at Disney World.
Not Shrek. Blue alien.
Stitch.
Remember when we went to that Stitch show at Disney World? And
Good times.
Put out the fart smell and I had to leave.
Yeah, where's the fart weather? Anyway, gotten pretty off topic to begin with. Emma, where do you want to start?
I don't know. I ended up just looking at different like weather systems in games. Apparently it just like I don't know, it just blows over my head because like there were there were a lot of more weather systems than I'd ever really thought about out there. You know?
Yeah. It seems like it's trendy, dynamic weather, to me.
Well, I think it's certainly like a in terms of like the cinematic version of dynamic weather. Like that's just a step forward in what the thing can process.
Right.
Basically. But like even going back to like things that have more to do with tactics or life sims or anything that's really not like a 3D action game, you see weather being important to it in some way.
Yeah.
So like even like I was thinking about like Fire Emblem. Those GBA games had
the fog.
Fog and rain also would sometimes make it so that you couldn't move as far in the rain. And the sand weather, of course. Of course,
the sand weather. A sandstorm is weather. It has storm in the name, okay?
Or even stuff like Animal Crossing has its seasons, right? Because it's a life sim. It has to have the distinct climes in order for it to actually feel authentic. It can't just be the same spring all year round in those things.
Well, Animal Crossing, though, is interesting because although it does have so like the season system Of course. Are seasons weather? This whole episode just gonna me being like, is that weather?
Seasons are defined by weather,
Right.
I think.
But in Animal Crossing, like, this is not to say, obviously, the weather system in Animal Crossing is important to your experience of the game. But it being raining in Animal Crossing doesn't actually really impact very much. I think there might be some different fish sometimes.
Don't have to water your flowers.
That's true. Actually, that is pretty much the... Well, rain mostly sucks in, like, action games, right? When you've got rain or snow or something in an action game, it's like, this mostly blows. But in life sims, because they're about life, rain is almost always a good thing. Because it waters your crops.
Yes.
I hadn't really thought about it in Animal Crossing because flowers are not like... I'm not as intensively into flowers as I am into compulsively collecting all the fish.
Bring back the flower competition, Animal Crossing.
That's true. Bring it back. But in Harvest Moon and in Stardew Valley, in games where you actually have a stamina meter or a finite time that isn't just like your lifetime to spend on the game each day, rain makes a big difference because it saves you time and energy. Your crops are watered so you can go do other things. So like when it rained in Stardew Valley, it was always like, let's go monster hunting that day because I didn't have to waste a lot of time watering everything.
To be fair, I think on a real farm, you would have to do some like extra work when it was raining because you don't want them to be overwatered either. But that's not an invitation for Stardew Valley to like implement like tarps or whatever.
Go back and listen to our episode on farming. So way back, the earliest example of weather that actually impacted the game that I was able to find was Utopia, which is a 1981 Intellivision game, which is like, you know, you're like a strategy world leader person. And so that one, you've got like, you know, little weather squares that can help with crops or cause natural disasters or that kind of thing. But there's a lot of early games that use rain for atmosphere. Rain is like the atmosphere thing in games. Don't you know that?
Yeah.
So even back to Super Metroid, Ghosts and Ghouls, A Link to the Past have like cinematics. And, you know, cinematics in the 80s way, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the aesthetic, I have to say, the aesthetic of like diagonal pixel lines, basically, just going across the screen is very good.
Yeah.
I don't know, I find it very pleasing in terms of like evoking the feeling of rain, even though it's basically just a bunch of lines going across the screen.
It is interesting, and maybe some people would argue that this is true across the board, but in rain in particular, it does sort of feel like the effectiveness of rain as an atmospheric element has kind of a parabolic arc over the course of gaming history. In that, you know, in the pixel art, it works quite well. And then you get to, like, early console, and it's like, this is bad. And only now are we getting back to, it looks like rain.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Which is not a dig at anyone. It's just interesting. Normally, I would think of graphics in games mostly having just an upward trajectory. But with something as difficult as rain, sometimes simpler is better. Why does rain make us sad, Emma?
Because water's sad. I don't know, we cry. That's water.
That was so... I thought you were going to be like, I don't know. Or you have to stay inside. Or something that made sense. And you were just like, spitting straight fire. Water is sad.
You know, like oceans are kind of sad, you know, you look out like over the vastness and you're like, that's a little sad. Yeah. I bet a lot of people in the olden days, like, you know, drowned a lot probably in the ocean. So maybe it's like ingrained in us from those times.
It just keeps going. You're like, water's sad. Oceans are sad.
That's what I'm saying. Water is just a sadder element. That's all I'm saying.
You're not wrong. I just like the way that you're just like making these sweeping pronouncements. Like I'm imagining you like you're, you know, leading up design for a game and you walk in and you like clear the whiteboard and you write on there, water is sad. And the team's like, genius! I always figured that rain makes me sad because, like, when I went to college in Miami, it would only ever rain for 30 minutes at a time. And so on the rare occasions where there was, like, actually a rainy day, it was like, I don't want to go anywhere. It's raining.
I like rain. So
I sort of do, except that I have to go places.
I guess so.
Rainy days make me want to go to the mall.
Interesting.
Rainy days give me an intense need to go to the mall, but I live in New York City, and there's not really a mall.
That's too bad.
I know. But it is interesting to me, just sort of how it just feels like it's and this is, I'm sure, true in movies and television and anything, but it's like rain is such a shorthand for, like, this is a moody or sad or dark or scary scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it decreases, it heightens things, I guess. It decreases your visibility and, like, your hearing and stuff. So it's like it closes in on, like, this one moment, right? In a way that is more cinematic than, like, oh, it's foggy.
Yeah.
You can't see anything.
On the flip side, I guess you see plenty of games that use rain to set a cozy atmosphere, though, which I guess is more you.
I guess so. Like what, exactly?
Well, I just remember us talking in our cozy games side quest about how, like, the sound of rain outside is a hallmark cozy element. So there's starting to be a trend toward more, like, rain being used as something to enhance positive experiences, like you are safe from the rain kind of situation.
Yeah.
But lots and lots of games with moody, rainy stuff. Special shout out, I guess, to Heavy Rain.
There is a lot of rain in Heavy Rain, shockingly.
For a purpose, it kills people.
It does.
So, like, plenty of hate to Heavy Rain for a lot of things. That was maybe a little strong, but oh well, I said it. But you know what? An effective use of rain where it doesn't really affect your gameplay exactly, perhaps. Although maybe it does in a game like that. Not the same way as we'll talk about with other games, but certainly for tying in the environmental effect to the story. Nice.
Man, Heavy Rain is just Persona 4, huh?
Is it?
In Persona 4, when it rains for a couple of days, that's like your last chance to finish the dungeon. Then there'll be one foggy day, and then if you leave the person in the dungeon, they'll die.
I see the similarity that you're drawing. I recognize it. I see it. I think they're not quite the same game.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I'm stretching.
Just a little bit.
I don't know, though.
I also have to do a special call out to the rain in Grand Theft Auto Definitive Edition.
Yes, it's very funny. Talk about lines going across the screen.
Yeah, talk about lines. If you've not seen the videos of what happened to the rain in these remasters of Grand Theft Auto, you ought to check it out, because it's really bad.
It really does kind of look like the pixel rain effects, except it's in a 3D game and you're trying to drive a car.
And it's, it's especially egregious because for the most part, driving sims, especially now, or the past, like, generation and a half, like, weather systems are a big part of pretty much every driving sim that exists these days.
Yeah.
Right? Whether that's just, even at the most simplistic form, whether that's like, there's a rainy course and there's a snowy course and there's a foggy course, right? But really even beyond that now, there's way more like dynamic weather where it changes throughout the course is a huge thing. Even dynamic weather that changes in response to real time. I thought Forza Horizon 5 system is kind of neat in that they have seasons, So yeah, okay, seasons have to do with weather. I know seasons have to do with weather. I'm trying to not just talk about seasons too much, right? We're not going to talk about Zelda Oracle of Seasons, right? Like, that's not a weather game.
Yes.
But in Forza Horizon 5, the seasons change weekly, and so each season, like, the courses have different weather patterns, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just think, like, anything where that weather changes in some way sort of tied to real time, I don't know. I just think it's kind of neat. It's interesting, especially for a game like Forza that wants you to kind of keep coming back.
Yeah.
It's an effective and interesting system. So kudos. But yeah, driving games, it's like there's got to be weather now. So it's especially egregious to release a Grand Theft Auto where it's like the rain is bad.
Yeah. It does kind of feel like anything that's sort of focused on the grandeur of its environments is sort of required to have a weather system now.
Yeah. Well, or anything that feels like, I am free to play and I want you to keep coming back and playing me.
Yeah. Yeah, that too.
Like Fortnite. Fortnite feels like the kind of thing that you would assume would have weather from the beginning, but only recently introduced dynamic weather. Seemingly mostly for the purposes of tornadoes, which, fair.
Yeah. I mean, in a battle royale, you don't just, a light drizzle.
Why
just
not?
for aesthetic.
I think that'd be dope. Like, let's have some truly dynamic weather. Yeah. Like,
I mean, I'd be fine with that. I'm just saying, perhaps they should prioritize weather that actually does stuff in that sort of game.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fortnite's a little bit, just a little bit less about the atmosphere, I feel like.
Fortnite photo mode. Give it to me.
Well, shall we talk about some of the bigger games that have notable weather systems?
Of course. Kingdom Hearts.
Yes, of course. Kingdom Hearts.
Just...
The storm, it does not even raining in the storm in Kingdom Hearts 1. There's just, the weather is dark moon.
It's dark moon weather.
It's windy, I guess.
Yeah.
It does rain in the secret movie of Kingdom Hearts 1.
I'll bet you anything that Quadratum has weather.
That would be funny. It also rains when Sora punches... Is it Davy Jones in Kingdom Hearts 3? It is Davy Jones,
yeah.
Punches Davy Jones in the face.
Yeah.
It's raining. The two most notable moments of Kingdom Hearts is when they use the rain.
No, I really think there's going to be weather in Quadratum. I think it's there were puddles in the secret movie.
Not puddles.
Well, we won't talk about puddles. Don't count as weather. Puddles are the after effects of weather. But there were puddles, which means that there was rain, which means for sure there's going to be a weather system. And so it's going to be like, what's rain? Anyway, I was just kidding. Go on. Let's talk about something real.
Real games with weather. It all always comes back to Breath of the Wild.
Little known indie, Breath of the Wild.
Yes. Which does have a pretty darn extensive weather system in terms of how different things interact with the weather. I was thinking about this. It's stuff like the temperature system is kind of an interestingly subtle way to like gate some areas off from the player at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Because so Breath of the Wild, you can get too cold or too hot, and you can address this by changing the clothes that you're wearing, or by eating certain foods that will keep you warmer or cooler for a certain period of time. But of course, you have to get those clothes and get the ingredients and figure out the recipes for those foods. So it's not wise to wander up into the mountains and kill yourself with frostbite immediately, like in your boxers.
This was a little targeted.
I didn't mean to.
No, I had never thought of it that way. And it's just another, obviously, in a game as big and open as Breath of the Wild, you have to figure out ways to not make it actually as open as it seems like it is or as it feels like it is. And I had never thought of it as the weather system being kind of a secret gatekeeping system. That's interesting. I had only ever thought of it as like whenever I'm climbing something, it decides to rain.
Yeah. Yeah, the main thing that I think people remember Breath of the Wild's weather system for is unfortunately the rain making it so that it's hard to climb because it's slippy.
Which is an interesting challenge sometimes. I respect it as like okay, that's interesting, but I also remember, granted, it has been 4 years since I played Breath of the Wild, something like that. So it's been a while, but the fact that I still remember it being like, the forecast is rain for the next 12 hours. I just have to like sit around next to this wall I want to climb until it stops raining.
I'm pretty sure if you're like in the middle of climbing a wall, also Link can just hold on where he is, like ad infinitum, until the rain stops without losing his stamina. Because it only goes down when you actually are climbing.
Powerful.
Yeah, so he just hangs out there until the rain stops.
Do you feel like there's anything about the weather system that's missing from Breath of the Wild? Like, do you wish they'd made it even more complicated?
I mean, sneezing, I was saying.
Yeah, pollen, you're right. Absolutely.
Absolutely sneezing.
Link should be able to lose a toe.
I feel like they could do something with, like, being in wet clothes for too long.
Oh, yeah, like getting sick.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So, like, when you get stuck in a rainstorm, you have to, like, take off your clothes to dry them, or just put on different clothes for a while.
God, people would hate that, though. People whine enough about the durability system. Can you imagine if there was, like, a you're damp system?
You're just vaguely damp.
But just, like, the idea of, like, I have to take off my, like, super legendary armor and run around in my boxies for a while.
Yeah. I don't think there's a weight system on the Breath of the Wild armor either, but you could do something where your waterlogged clothes are heavier.
You sure
So there's
could.
definitely ways that they could continue to push the weather system if they so chose in the sequel to Breath of the Wild, the official name.
Yeah.
The other thing, the one other thing that I think is really funny in this is if you are wearing metal on your person or like holding a weapon that's metal in a thunderstorm, you will get struck by lightning in Breath of the Wild.
It does kind of warn you, to be fair, as I recall.
Yeah.
You kind of tinkle a little.
Yes, you kind of tingle. I just think I think it's a funny thing.
Yeah. I feel like they could do more with wind. I feel like wind could be more of a thing.
That's true, yeah.
Especially given that it seems like glider.
Especially since you have the glider.
Yeah. But not to always be like, nothing comes close to Breath of the Wild, because we don't even really like Breath of the Wild on this podcast.
I respect Breath of the Wild.
No, that's true. Sorry, that was
very
too harsh.
much not a game for me.
I feel like maybe I could go back and do better now, but I'm scared.
I don't think Breath of the Wild is a very fun game to watch.
Click my boyfriend would love watching me play it, though, so...
I remember watching you play it and
I
being
know,
like...
you hated it, I know.
Excruciatingly frustrated.
I know. I got it.
It has nothing to do with you, it's just something about the game itself is like...
No, it has everything to do with me. And you're like, Madelyn, you're going over there. Why are you turning to a new direction? Because you saw a mountain in the distance. Not too much fog in Breath of the Wild either.
That's true. Yeah, there's just like that one area that's foggy, right?
Yeah. And there's underwater stuff, right? So there could be a tsunami. Earthquake.
This is how the tsunami can still happen.
I'm just trying to say, like, they already have, like, by far the most comprehensive weather system. And not only that, but I think the most comprehensive weather system that, like, isn't just there to be, like, fancy.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's a lot of weather in games now that's just like, look at our particle physics.
Yeah. I mean, nothing against that. I do think rain works really well as, or just weather can work very well as a tone setter. And sometimes you want to use weather for a narrative purpose instead of a mechanical purpose, and that's fine. I mentioned this, I guess, just in the notes, I think, but like Lost Judgment has a couple of set pieces that are like set in like pouring rain. And I really wish there had been like rain leading up to those cutscenes, because it's kind of like you go there, it's not raining, you trigger the cutscene, suddenly it is torrential rain. And I know they wanted the rain for like the atmosphere of it, but I felt like that atmosphere would have been better set if they had managed to make it rain on the way there, you know?
Well, I feel like especially, I mean, who knows the future of the Judgment series, right? But especially as they move toward turn-based in the Yakuza games, there's definitely a possibility for Pokemon style, kind of, and Persona style even, but I think even more Pokemon style, like area of effect kind of
Yeah, that's
vibes.
true. Yeah.
Which I hadn't really even thought of. Like, I wrote, oh, you know, the new Pokemon games have a weather system, right? Because they do. Sword and Shield. Apparently, the weather in each area of the wild area changes every day.
Oh,
which I
wow.
didn't really know.
I didn't know
I mean,
that
I think some of them are almost always sandstorm, but, you know. And sometimes it's affected by, like, changes in the real life season. So, like, there's times of year where everything is going to be snowing for a few days and that sort of thing. So I was like, oh, that's a weather system. But I hadn't really even thought about it. It's like, oh, obviously there are Pokemon attacks that are just like, it makes it rain or it makes it really sunny.
Yeah.
And that has impact on the battle. And that could be something you trigger, or it could be something that's like exists in the area. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a weather system too. Even though it's not trying to be showy about the graphics of it, it's definitely a weather system.
Yeah. Triangle Strategy had a bit of that also. There was some maps they're just raining, but there was like one character you can recruit that can make it either rain or typhoon. So rain or very rain, basically. And those had different effects on, like, there'll be puddles, so if you use lightning magic on the puddles, it'll go through the whole puddle and get anyone on those squares, for instance.
A puddle system. We should really just do a side quest on puddles.
Yes. And some characters are stronger. Some characters are stronger in certain weather conditions, or certain characters could move more or less depending on weather conditions in a similar Fire Emblem type way.
I'd like to see if there are ways that weather, like, I feel like weather as implemented in many modern games is almost always primarily about, like, movement, right? Maybe enemy damage, right? But, like, mostly movement, right? It's about, like, you can't climb this, or it's slower, or you can't see where you're going, or in a lot of stealth games, a surprising number of stealth games, it was like, it's raining, so you're quieter.
Yeah.
Like, I guess that makes sense.
Well, it's more like everything else is louder, so.
Right. I guess, yeah, exactly. But I would be interested to see, like, what else can we do with that? How else can rain affect your character? Does it matter that your character is feeling slightly sad? Or how does your character feeling cold affect other things? I feel like as more games, the tendrils of choice-based stuff continue to grab every game, right? I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to play around with, like, how does your character feel about the weather, in ways that could be more fun than just, like, you move at half speed.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of systems that have a little bit more to them than just movement. Days Gone has weather system. It snows a lot and also rains, which does have effect on your movement, including, like, obviously how well your motorcycle drives, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But also just has an impact on like various behaviors of the freakers in that game, which the way their zombie system works is usually there's like hordes that come, rather than like you're walking around and find like one or two in the way that you might in The Last of Us or another zombie game, outside of set pieces. Like they have this big system where like a swarm will come at you and you have to deal with it. So it affects sort of those patterns based on what the weather is. I was reading like one review of it that was like, well, the rain makes you like harder to see and the freakers aren't out as much, but if you're too careless in the rain and get stuck in a bad situation anyway, and you try to take your motorbike out, you will, hydroplane if you're too fast trying to get away.
Whoops.
Which is like, that's an interesting series of events for setting up like a zombie encounter, I thought.
Definitely.
Beyond just like you can't climb things.
Too bad Sony killed it.
Yeah, too bad Sony killed it. I think Days Gone had a lot of interesting mechanical ideas. I cannot say the story, anything I know about the story compels me at all. But
see, this is what I mean though, when it's like sometimes games are like, here's our particle physics. Like sometimes it just feels like maybe Days Gone should have spent a little less time on their beautiful snow and a little more time on the idea.
I mean, the thing is, I think that it was probably more likely that they came up with the systems that they wanted to make first.
Right.
And then made the story on top of that.
Why like a Talk This mashup, you say?
No. But yeah, the snow system also, it accumulates as it snows. Like, you can watch it accumulate on things, which is a pretty neat technological feature that I can't really think of in other games. Usually there's just like already snow on the ground, so they don't have to deal with that, Yeah. Oh, I forgot, there's wind in Kingdom Hearts 3.
Oh, you're great.
Frozen
yeah,
World.
great. Right, when you're sailing the ship.
Oh, sure, when you're sailing the ship, but also in the Frozen World when you have to hide behind the stones, but Donald and Goofy never do it. And
there's
so
snow, too, in the Let It Go
are blown away.
movie.
Yes, but I don't think it actually snows in the Frozen World. There's just snow on the ground. But anyway, even when it is snowing in video games, I feel like it usually starts with snow on the ground, so it does not have to, like, show you it accumulating over time.
Yeah, definitely. Also, because snow usually takes forever to accumulate, right? Like, normally you would never see it.
Well, if it's really heavy.
That's true. But even then, even if it's really heavy, you'd still have to, like, stand in one place for a long time in the real world. Like, longer than you would ever be standing in one place in a video game, I mean.
Sure. I guess it's just more, like, well, you wouldn't have to stand in one place.
That's true.
Like, if you went out on a really long walk in the snow, by the time you came back, there would probably be accumulation.
That's true.
And that's basically what you do in video games, right? You go out on really long walks.
In the snow.
Yeah. Not always in the snow, but when it is snowing, it would accumulate. The other interesting one, which I didn't know until I looked into this, is Ghost of Tsushima has a weather system, but the frequency of its weather is actually tied to its morality system. So the more that you stray from, like, the code or whatever, the more stormy it gets in the game, the more frequently it'll rain and be stormy. Coincidentally, that's the more stealthy route anyway, I think, so it being more stormy helps you continue down that route, if I remember correctly. Whereas if you stick to your code, you'll get more clear days as the game goes on.
I feel like if we're gonna have morality systems, we might as well go whole hog like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really neat idea. It's like heavy-handed, sure, but whatever, There is an item, like, you can get a flute that you play different songs and things happen, and you can learn songs to change the weather, which I do think sort of dilutes that effect a little bit if you learn those songs and you're just like, no, I would like it to not be raining, and just play your flute a lot.
Yeah.
What would be very cool is if you go, stray too far down one, you can't do the other anymore, right? Like, it's raining and you're like, try to play the song, it's like, you aren't allowed.
Yeah, over the course of this conversation, I think what I'm realizing is that actually what I want is just more weird implementations of weather. I feel like there's a lot now of like beautiful snow, moody rain, right? Some fog, but give me rain that's tied to how hungry my character is. Or like I think Timefall is a good example. Timefall, a bold reimagining of what rain can be.
That's from Death Stranding for the audience.
Yes.
This clarification.
I do often feel when I'm walking in the rain that I am deteriorating and aging with every drop.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm carrying stuff.
Yes. Yeah, the way that weather works in Death Stranding is while it is raining, you wear a suit, right? So you're not necessarily aging in it, but all of the stuff on your back is slowly deteriorating. So like the package, if the box gets too old and worn, the stuff inside will start getting damaged as well. So you don't want to be in the Timefall for very long. Also, ghosts.
Yeah.
I think there are more ghosts in the rain. That's true. We talked about that on Fatal Frame, right? It's like water is, there's more ghosts when it's wet, is what one of the people said.
Well, it's true, right? Like all horror games or vaguely horror-y games, spooky games, it's got to be raining.
Or foggy, I guess, yeah.
You're right. Fair. Yes, fog, of course. But it's got to be one of those. Maybe snow.
Moisture.
Maybe. But it's going to be dark out if it's snowing.
It requires a moisture, is what we're saying.
You must be damp to be in a horror situation.
You need a damp status effect in your horror games.
Sweaty status effect, really.
Yeah, that's true.
I'd like to see Link have a hard time climbing in the heat because he's sweaty.
That's true. Yeah, that'd be good.
But yeah, I think I just want, like, I feel like there's a lot of really successful literal weather now. But, like, are you gonna beat being able to track bunnies in the snow in Red Dead Redemption 2 with your dynamic, realistic weather system? Probably not.
I did think that story about the storm chasers in Red Dead Redemption 2 was very funny. That's like a thing real people do, right?
Yeah, storm chasing is a thing real people do, but it has like a real... Okay, I shouldn't be too harsh about this. Real people chasing storms are doing it for the scientific purpose of, like, it's important for tracking the storm.
Yes.
I mean, not all of them are. Some of them are doing it for their Instagram, but...
Yes.
There are scientists, too.
Yes.
That article that you posted, so this is about someone who... There's storms in Red Dead Redemption 2, and this is about a guy who decided... He wanted to know more about how those were generated and how they moved, and so he did, like, literal storm chasing in Red Dead 2.
Yes.
And it was interesting to me that article was posted in, like, April 2020.
Yes.
And I was like, I wonder when this guy was doing the storm chasing. Could it have been, like, mid-March 2020? That does feel like the kind of thing you decide to do at about that time in the world, doesn't it? I was like, yeah. I'll cut the guy a little more slack if he was like, quarantine. Let's chase
people
storms.
In big games like that, though, people just like poking at everything.
No, they do. Know? I know.
So you just get people doing that just for fun, right? For something to do in the game.
And to be fair, he only chased like 3 storms. So like when I saw the title, I was like, that's a weird thing to like make your hobby, but.
Well, he did chase them and also, like, map where lightning struck and, like, other data. So it wasn't just, like, he was like, oh, I'll just follow it for fun. He was, like, taking notes about each storm, which I think was funny.
More of that. More storm chasers. Well, Emma, what game do you wish had weather that doesn't? You already said Lost Judgment, so yes, but what else?
Yeah, I think just the Yakuza games in general could benefit for some rain. They're already, like, really dramatic things, right? That like some rain would really do
some
wonders.
Snow, Emma. They're all set at Christmas.
It rains in winter also.
Yeah, but snow.
Snow too. It needs some dramatic weather, you know?
Do people refer to the Yakuza games ever as Japanese Die Hard, or is that a new thing that I have come up with?
I think that you have made that up.
I think it's really spot on. Takes place at Christmas. Look, they're not cops, right? I get it. It's not exactly the same. Takes place at Christmas. Big tower.
Sure.
Dramatic. Fighty.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, just throwing it out there into the world. I don't know. They can barely handle modeling like hair. The women's hair in those games is always terrible.
That's true.
So
yeah.
I don't know if we want wet.
That's fair. I think that it would be interesting for the next Final Fantasy remake part to have a lot of weather. Because it's a very big deal, right? At the end of that game, they come out and it's raining because they've been under the roof the whole time.
Yeah.
So I think that would be thematically interesting if they pushed weather in the next part of that game.
Well, and it's about the environment, right? That's their whole deal. So
yeah, it's also about the environment a little bit.
So it feels
that
like,
part
it
too.
feels like you could do some nice things. Or like sometimes they're in areas where it's like truly beautiful weather, right? And sometimes they're in areas where it's like this is climate change.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
it's acid rain, or you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. That's a good one. I feel like I had some ideas and then you gave me your good ideas and I forgot about
Come on, bad ideas, Mel. Give me your awful ideas.
I'm trying to think. So much stuff already has weather now that it's like, what else needs weather? Obviously, Fire Emblem Three Houses should have had more weather.
There's rain in that.
Yeah, I know, but more.
There's rain and fog, I believe. There's some foggy levels.
I mean, like, at the school, though.
Oh, you're right. It doesn't really rain at the monastery, does it?
No. Snow
far
would
as
be
I
fun
remember.
there in the winter, like all the kids enjoying the snow.
I think that would require more animation than that game is
Look,
really
I'm not
capable
saying
of.
they could do it. I'm just wish listing here. Just ideas, just thoughts. Oh, I feel like I really had good ones, and I'm not remembering them anymore. My brain is shutting down. My brain has been going like, you've been talking about rain. It's kind of raining outside here right now.
I think Elden Ring should have weather.
I think Elden Ring does maybe have some weather.
I just think it should be there to punish you. I think
Fair
whenever
enough.
you're doing well, it should start raining.
Yeah, the game should just be like, I hate you.
Yeah, that's
at
what I think.
all times.
Yeah.
Well, any last thoughts on the weather?
I would like... Oh, the one last weather system that I thought was funny is Shenmue. Shenmue?
Oh, yeah.
Shenmue, I feel like is how I hear it said, even
Mhm.
if that's probably not the pronunciation. We've talked about it on the show a very long time ago now.
Yeah.
But it's very much a game that is devoted to, like, the minutia. You just kind of walk around and talk to people and drive forklifts and eat some food. It's just like a life sim, but also there's some combat, and maybe you're trying to get revenge for something. They're very long games that I think were initially conceived of as a 7-part series, all about, like, a singular goal, so that tells you a lot about the pacing of this thing. But at the time it came out, it had this magic weather system that was basically like randomly generated weather based on every day that was pretty new for the time. But what I really found interesting about it is in your second playthrough, you can turn on like historical weather, and it will actually, like, every day of, like, I think it's in Yokohama in the 80s, it'll just have the weather that was actually in that place at that time on that day. Which is just it's so in keeping with the ethos of that series, right? Just so minute and mundane.
It's fascinating because it's like, who is that for? Who feels that nostalgic about the exact weather in Yokohama in 1986?
It's Yokosuka, actually. Okay. I just looked it up.
Yokosuka. Who feels that? Even worse. Yokohama, at least I've heard of, right? How many people are playing this? Like, yes, my youth.
I mean, it's all about immersing yourself in it, right? So, I don't know. I think it's a funny thing to add. And I'm not sure if it did have any gameplay effects, but if it did, I think that if you turn it on, it is just, like, raining a lot. Mm-hmm. And maybe you don't want that the first time through, so it makes sense as something to turn on.
No, I understand why you would randomize it. It's just like, why did you bother with this? I get it. It's like their thing is the little details. And maybe, you know what? I'd like more weird weather, so I shouldn't complain. But I'm also kind of like,
Yeah.
Hades should have weather.
That would be funny. Can it rain in the underworld?
And you'd come back and be like, weird that it was raining. And he's like, shut up, boy.
You're right. That's exactly how the dialogue would go. You also reminded me that there's weather in Persona, which I just hadn't even thought about before this. And I was thinking, like, there is not weather in Persona 3. There's, like, a plot-relevant typhoon, and that's it. There's not, like, rainy days or anything. And so I was just thinking about it. I was like, wow, that's really funny. They were like, the calendar system is, like, very plot important in Persona 3, but they were like, we like this, so we'll bring it to Persona 4. And then the weather system is very plot relevant in Persona 4, but they were like, we like this, we'll bring it to Persona 5. I was like, that's very funny.
Look, once you've introduced weather, you can't take it away.
That's true, you're right, yeah.
Like, you can't be like, there's no rain anymore.
I just hadn't thought about that they made, like, these very, like, very emblematic of those series things. Like, very plot relevant in their first introduction, but then they were just like, this is part of it now, you know? This is how it works now.
Yeah. Now there's weather and time.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, do you have a favorite example of weather in games? Or just a favorite example of weather? Feel free to share that too, I guess. Do you think that water is sad? Do you find it annoying when you're climbing in Breath of the Wild and you fall for the billionth time because you think maybe this time you'll make it up even though it's raining and you don't want to wait anymore, but you freaking don't? Then hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games that are in the hat, and read our blog, featuring long-running series, Split Screen, and Clickbait Boyfriend. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you should subscribe so you never miss an episode on Sundays at noon. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Cast, anywhere that you can find podcasts, wherever you found the podcast today, you can find Talk This. Next week, I remember that it's Pokemon, but I'm blanking on the old game.
Old game is Earth Defense Force.
Earth Defense Force.
And new game is Pokemon Legends, specifically.
Yes.
We've done Pokemon before, but I think this one has enough different about it that it'll be interesting to talk about it.
Also, I guarantee we did Pokemon in, like, 2017.
Yes, also that.
I barely knew what a video game was. So, maybe don't go back and listen to that one. So that's what's next week. In 2 weeks, it'll be side quest time. It'll be time for us to talk about our past 6 weeks in gaming, where we recap all of the games, and Emma talks about Cold Steel for half an hour. So look forward to that.
I do not talk about Cold Steel for that long. I will look up and see if there is raid. I think there's raid in Cold Steel 3. I will have to look it up and see.
I think the character's name is Reen.
You're very funny.
Anyway, look forward to that. That's in 2 weeks. So that's it for this week's show. Thanks for listening. Emma, do you have a weather-themed sign-off?
This week, I hope that the weather will just make up its mind about what season it is.
That was for you.
Yep.